In 1979, a 22-year-old journalist walked into a San Diego high school, told the principal his name was Dave Cameron, and spent an entire year pretending to be a senior. That one lie gave us one of the greatest teen movies ever made. Here are 10 weird facts about Fast Times at Ridgemont High that most people never knew. Starting with number 10, the Oscar class nobody saw coming. In 1982, Fast Times at Ridgemont High looked like exactly what it was. A sun-soaked R-rated teen comedy about pizza, bad jobs, and questionable life choices. Nobody walked out of that theater thinking they'd just watched the future of American cinema. But that's exactly what happened. Sean Penn was playing a surfer who ordered a pizza to his history class. Forrest Whitaker was a quiet kid who destroyed a football team after his Camaro got wrecked. And somewhere in the background, barely visible, was a young Nicolas Cage appearing uncredited as one of Brad's buddies. He'd auditioned for Brad and didn't get it. A rejection that feels almost poetic given everything that came after. 3 actors, 3 Academy Awards between them, 1 mall food court. This wasn't Sundance. This wasn't prestige drama. It was a throwaway teen comedy that accidentally assembled one of the most decorated casts in Hollywood history before any of them were famous enough to matter. Number 9, the guy who was almost Maverick, flipping burgers in a pirate hat. Before Top Gun made him a legend, Tom Cruise walked into the Fast Times audition room as a teenager fresh off taps. He wanted the role of Brad Hamilton. And for a moment, it almost happened. But the filmmakers had a problem. Cruise had this locked-in, slightly terrifying intensity even back then. The kind of energy that works when you're flying a fighter jet. It does not work when you're supposed to be a lovable loser in a Captain Hook costume getting laughed at by a woman at a red light. Brad needed to be humiliated. Cruise looked like he would never allow that. So the role went to Judge Reinhold, who brought a perfectly broken everyman quality that made you root for him through every disaster. Reinhold made Brad the guy you'd been. Cruise would have made Brad the guy you were slightly afraid of. 1 casting decision and 2 completely different Hollywood timelines. Number 8. Sean Penn showed up as Spicoli and never came back. When Sean Penn walked into Amy Heckerling's office to audition for Fast Times, he didn't bring a script. He didn't prepare a monologue. He basically wandered in like he'd just come from the beach with sand still in his shoes and said he knew this guy. Heckerling later recalled knowing almost immediately. That's Spicoli. No extended audition required. But here's where it gets strange. From the first day on set, Penn stayed in character between takes. He insisted that cast and crew call him Jeff, not Sean. Jeff. If you called out his real name, you got nothing. Call him Spicoli and you'd get a hang loose and that slow surfer wave. His co-stars weren't entirely sure if they were watching genius at work or a guy who genuinely lost track of where the character ended and the person began. It's probably a little of both, because Penn goes on to become one of the most intense, serious actors of his generation. And to this day, Spicoli is still the role that follows him everywhere. Hey bud, Let's Party has outlasted Mystic River, Milk, and everything in between. He walked onto that set as Jeff Spicoli, and 4 decades later, the world still won't let him leave. Number 7. The shoe that conquered America without a single dollar changing hands. In 1982, Vans were not a national brand. They were a Southern California thing. Skaters in Long Beach knew them. Kids cruising Venice Beach knew them. But if you were growing up in Ohio or Georgia, or anywhere without a coastline, there's a solid chance you'd never heard of them. Then Fast Times hit theaters. Sean Penn had personally selected the black and white checkerboard slip-ons as part of Spicoli's look. No corporate meeting, no brand deal, no endorsement contract. Just an actor deciding that this character would absolutely wear these shoes. And that was it. Within months, kids from Maine to Montana were hunting down those slip-ons like they were currency. Vans went from regional skate culture staple to a name every teenager in the country recognized, all because one actor made one wardrobe choice. There is no record of any formal product placement agreement. Penn essentially handed Vans a 90-minute national commercial, completely free of charge. 40 years later, you can still walk into any mall in America and find the exact same checkerboard slip-ons. Vans owes Sean Penn a pizza statue, at the very least. Number 6. Led Zeppelin said no, even to the guy who lived on their tour bus. By 1982, Cameron Crowe was not a random fan begging for a favor. He had profiled Led Zeppelin for Rolling Stone as a teenager. He'd spent time on their tour bus. He had history with these people going back to when most of his future audience was still in elementary school. So when he was putting together the Fast Times soundtrack, he reached out and asked for a Zeppelin track. Big riffs, California cruising energy, windows down, valley roads, early 80s summer. It made complete sense. But here's what happened. In 1982, Led Zeppelin treated their catalog like it was stored in a vault somewhere beneath the Atlantic Ocean. No commercials, no movies, no exceptions. Their manager Peter Grant was famous for it, and Crowe's personal history with the band didn't move anything. The answer was no. So Crowe found other tracks, and the soundtrack still worked. But think about what we almost had. Any Zeppelin riff thundering over a Ridgemont High parking lot scene. That's a version of this movie we came within one phone call of getting. Turns out you can spend years on tour with one of the greatest rock bands in history, and when the licensing office closes the door, you're just another guy asking permission. Number 5. The pool scene had the most unforgettable song in the whole movie, and they cut it from the soundtrack. There is a moment in Fast Times at Ridgemont High that every single person who saw it burned into their memory. You know exactly which one. Phoebe Cates, the pool, the slow motion, and the opening notes of Moving in Stereo by the Cars drifting underneath everything. That song and that scene became completely inseparable. You cannot hear those opening notes without your brain completing the rest automatically. It is one of the most recognized music cues in all of 1980s cinema. So you can imagine the look on every teenager's face when they ran out to buy the official Fast Times soundtrack album, and Moving in Stereo was not on it. Not on side A, not hiding at the end of side B. Just gone. Licensing issues kept it off the album entirely. The single most memorable piece of music in the entire film was left off the film's own soundtrack. If you wanted it, you had to go buy the Cars debut album separately, which is genuinely a great record, so it wasn't a tragedy. But the principle of the thing is maddening. One job. They had one job. Number 4. Rock royalty showed up at a red light just to laugh at Brad Hamilton. There is a small moment in Fast Times that most people never thought twice about. Brad Hamilton is sitting at a red light in his Captain Hook uniform, looking like every bad decision he ever made has somehow combined into a single costume. And the woman in the car next to him takes one look and completely loses it laughing. That woman is Nancy Wilson. As in Heart, as in Barracuda, Crazy on You, one of the most respected guitarists of her generation. She was there because she was dating Cameron Crowe at the time. When your boyfriend is writing the defining teen comedy of 1982, apparently you get pulled into a scene at a red light whether you planned on it or not. But that cameo was just the beginning of the connection. Nancy and Cameron married in 1986. And years later, Wilson composed the score for Almost Famous, Crowe's semi-autobiographical film about his teenage years as a rock journalist. The woman who laughed at Brad's lowest moment eventually helped score one of the most celebrated music films ever made. Not bad for a blink and you miss it red light appearance. Number 3. The real Mr. Hand was out there and he took everything personally. Mr. Hand was not a cartoon villain. He was not some made-up buzzkill designed to give Spicoli someone to bounce off of. He was based on a real teacher. A man who was genuinely, deeply, almost philosophically obsessed with one thing. His time. Not class time, not school time, his time. Every distraction, every whispered conversation, every rogue slice of pepperoni delivered to his classroom was a personal theft from his lifespan. And the filmmakers understood that the scariest version of this character was not someone who screamed. So they cast Ray Walston, a seasoned actor who understood that real authority doesn't raise its voice. It just waits. Walston played Mr. Hand as a man calmly documenting your future failures. He didn't hate Spicoli. He just refused to pretend that the world owed anyone a good time. At 16, when he tore up those concert tickets, it felt like a federal crime. Looking back, he might have been the only adult in that building thinking past the weekend. But in Ridgemont High, that made him the villain. And it still kind of does. Number 2. Universal handed $5 million to a first-time director and told her to make something disposable. The studio's plan for Fast Times at Ridgemont High was not complicated. Give Amy Heckerling around $5 million, let her make a teen movie, collect the modest returns, and move on to something more serious. No awards expectations, no cultural legacy goals, just another R-rated comedy to throw at the summer crowd and forget about by September. Nobody told the audience that, though. Fast Times grossed over $27 million domestically. more than 5 times its budget. Teenagers lined up, snuck in, and dragged friends back for second viewings. An R-rated comedy with no major stars, made for pocket change by Hollywood standards, outperformed movies with 10 times the marketing muscle. And the studio had been convinced that R rating would kill them. Meanwhile, an entire generation was finding creative solutions. Older siblings, distracted ticket takers, strategic timing. Everyone found a way in. That $5 million throwaway bet rewrote the rules for what a teen movie could do at the box office. Hollywood finally understood that if you treat teenagers like actual human beings with real humiliations and real feelings, they will show up. Universal got a pile of cash. We got a cultural touchstone. Fair trade. Number 1. The guy who gave us everything spent a full year lying about who he was. Most writers research a movie by reading books or doing interviews. Cameron Crowe enrolled in high school. In 1979, the 22-year-old walked into Ridgemont High in San Diego, convinced the principal to let him pose as a senior under the name Dave Cameron, and spent an entire academic year living as a student. Classes, pep rallies, cafeteria lunches, the whole thing. This was not a journalist visiting for a week with a notepad. Crowe had already toured with Led Zeppelin at 16 and written for Rolling Stone as a teenager. He had sat with rock gods. And he decided the real story was happening in a suburban school hallway. So he went back. He documented everything. The gossip, the parking lot conversations, the 5-point plans, the nervous dances, and yes, the kid who actually had a pizza delivered to class mid-lecture. Every detail went into field notes. That's why the dialogue in Fast Times doesn't sound like adults guessing what teenagers talk like. Because it wasn't. It came from real hallways, real food courts, real classrooms. Spicoli was inspired by real students Crowe observed at Claremont. Brad Hamilton was built from notes on several kids he'd befriended over that year. When the book came out, the students at Claremont finally understood what had happened. The quiet older kid who never said much in homeroom had been writing everything down. Most 22-year-olds in 1979 were figuring out Rent. Crowe was building a time capsule. One that launched Oscar winners, redefined a genre, and gave us a movie we're still quoting more than 4 decades later. All because one guy raised his hand in a school he had no business being in and said, "Yeah, I'm Dave. I'm new here. And if you've made it this far, you clearly remember when movies like this felt like they were made specifically for you." Hit that subscribe button and stay with us, because there are plenty more deep dives into the films and shows that raised us. We'll see you in the next one.